Hey, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slade, and today we're going to talk about an interview Stephanie McMahon did with David Meltzer, which is not the Dave Meltzer of Wrestling Observer newsletter, but David Meltzer of Entertainment. He did a short interview with Stephanie McMahon for what he called the Playbook, or the Playbook to Success. So he asked her some questions, and basically we're going to go through it. It's very, wrestling websites have kind of picked out some of the most salacious bits and posted, quotes and things like that. But I'm going to go through probably the whole thing. It was only 20 minutes, so it didn't take a lot of time. So let's go through it, and we're going to give some ideas. So Stephanie talked about connecting on various platforms or connecting with the audience. And she says basically the audience kind of chooses which platforms that you use. So she did say you have to customize your content to each individual platform, and you have to understand the needs of the audience, and you have to be authentic. You have to believe in yourself and in your brand. So this is all very important stuff. It's also very bland, boilerplate corporate stuff, but it's still kind of true. WB, when they did Facebook events, they were Facebook events. They do stuff on Instagram. I complained about this actually, that they do promos on Instagram and stuff like that. And I don't see it because I don't follow on Instagram, but there are people who do follow on Instagram. So I understand it. There's a lot of Twitter content where they do WWE exclusive content for YouTube, or they do it for Twitter. Like the Lana going to the hospital spot, they did that on Twitter. It wasn't on Raw. You had to follow on Twitter in order to see it. I understand it. This all seems to be pretty true. Connecting with the audience is an important thing. So then David Meltzer asked her about the legacy of the WWE and how to deal with the competition. And Stephanie says that you're competing with everything. She actually took Vince McMahon's idea. Vince says, always says, we compete with everything that's on TV. And Stephanie takes it to the next level, that they compete with everything, period. That people could be playing video games, they could be reading books or doing anything. So you're competing for time. That you're always competing with people's time. And that when you are competing with people's time, then you have to create resonating and meaningful content. You have to over deliver and reward people when they do tune in. And you have to engage. That you have to engage, listen, and respond to your fan base. Show them that their voice matters. And and this was the interesting part that a lot of people kind of took and ran with it, because they said, "Oh, WWE doesn't listen." She says, "Well, we do listen, though creatively people have their own opinions." So what I did is I sit here and I thought about that. Does WWE listen to the audience? And I've done numerous videos, or basically as I sat and jacked my jaw about this whole thing, I always say the audience is so many different people. And it's very, very difficult to say who the audience is. Okay. So in preparation for this, I kind of looked at something and just put some things in perspective. So I think that anybody who listens to this video can agree that the most influential wrestling journalist in the business right now is Dave Meltzer. Without a doubt, right? Dave Meltzer has 237,000 followers on Twitter. 237,000. Twitter, I believe, is the largest platform. Maybe there's more on Facebook. I'm not going to go and add up all his social media stuff. Brian Alvarez has 119,000. The Wrestling Observer newsletter has 110,000 followers. Collectively, they have 466,000 followers on Twitter. Just those three accounts. Lana alone has 1.5 million. Just Lana by herself. Bray Wyatt alone has 1.4 million. They have less than 1 million of the Twitter engagements than Lana. You have to keep in perspective. When these people are saying, you don't listen to the audience, it's like, who are you listening to? These are, and yes, they're sure they blocked some people, but mostly the people that they blocked probably, if you give them another 10,000 people that they may have blocked, they still wouldn't give them to 500,000 people. And, just Lana alone has over double the audience that these people have. So you have to keep in perspective what everyone is talking about here when you talk about the audience. Who is the audience? Is it the 1.5 million people that follows Lana, or the 237,000 people who follow Dave Meltzer? And I'm just talking about just Twitter. Who knows how many? She probably has far more on Instagram where she actually posts, pictures and workout stuff and all that kind of stuff, and Facebook and all these different things. So you have to think about who the audience is. So when people say we don't listen to the audience, it's like maybe they don't listen to these dweebs online. The Wrestling Observer, the Fightfuls, the Wrestling Incs, they don't listen to them. The No DQs, they don't listen to them. But they are listening to all of the other people. And there is a substantial number of people, and just for, some context, WWE, just their Twitter account has 11 million followers. 11 million. So if you compare the entire most of the wrestling media, because almost not many of them are going to have the following that Dave Meltzer has, you would probably have to tack on 7 or 8 more in order to get a little over a little over 1 million to compete with like the extent that Bray Wyatt has control over the audience. And that's just social media, let alone Twitter, YouTube and different things like that. It's a massive corporation. They have audiences all over the world. There's going to be people, and that's why it's not a knock on Dave Meltzer to say that they don't have that much influence. It's just a fact that he's trying to influence a global corporation, and he's trying to turn this small pocket of people against them, or trying to quote unquote tell the truth about them or expose them or whatever. It's like you're talking to people who are predisposed to liking what you do already anyway, and combined it's less than 500,000 people. So I don't know. It just seems weird to me that when people say that they don't listen to the audience, it's like, well, you have to define the audience. Define what the audience is. I can't tell you. Either way it goes. Stephanie started talking about, there are different audiences. And I'm glad that she mentioned that, because she says that the live audience gives real-time feedback. And that's something that, of course, they're missing today, is that people don't know, you don't really know how people are feeling in the building, because there are no people in the building. So she says that, that was something that was very important, is that you get that real-time feedback from the live attendance audience. But, then so David Meltzer, the David Meltzer of entertainment, he says, he talked about the company accepting criticism or, accepting hate and trolls or whatever, and how she deals with them. So Stephanie says that on screen, she plays a heel, and that she finds the antagonist to be far more interesting, and that it's a simple story of protagonist antagonist leading to constant conflict resolution, and that you want the antagonist to be as villainous as possible, so that you will root for the hero, which of course is common sense. And anybody who can tell you anything about storytelling will tell you that, except maybe Cody, who thinks that there's no such thing as baby faces and heels, whatever. And she says that she doesn't really listen to, from a business perspective, she doesn't accept the term haters. She says that what she does is she tries to look at it as constructive feedback. That, there are some things that people want changed. There are things people want improved. And, and she takes that into account, and they look at that and they listen to that and they pay attention to that. But, there's a lot of things that, are not constructive criticism, that she really has says, like, you can't just pay attention to that. That's just not important. And I find that to be very interesting, because how do you suss out what is constructive and what isn't? I always try to be constructive. And what I mean by that is I will say something is wrong, but I will try to say how you can fix it. How can it be fixed? And I always find that people find that to be interesting, that if you say this sucks, this is how you fix this. Even if you do something, you could do something completely new, completely different, and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know I wanted that. I didn't know that could be interesting. And this is why you shouldn't, you have to do your own, you have to write your own story. You can't listen to the audience, because the audience will have you repeating the same thing, the same song and dance all over again. And this kind of is something that I've learned that from musicians, that if you're a musician and you go do a set, you can't take requests, because they'll have you playing the songs from 15, 20 years ago, and you'll never actually get to play any of your new stuff. Because a lot of people who come to the concerts, they may be older fans, So, you're trying to play your new material for them to get them engaged with your new material, and they just keep screaming out, play something from 15 years ago. And you're like, oh God. You know, like I remember when I went to a Lauryn Hill concert, and because of, different lawsuits that she had been involved in, Lauryn Hill only has one album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, right? She cannot play any of the songs from that album. So, well, not in their original forms because there were some lawsuits between her and the band at the time. So she has essentially lost the lawsuit. She can no longer play any of those original songs. And you could hear people yelling, like, play the real version of this song. There's a version of the song that I want to hear on the CD. She can't. Okay. And yeah, there are people who, if you quote unquote listen to the audience, to get you fucking sued. Okay. You can't do it. And that type of thing happens quite often. Or you have people who just want to grow creatively. And that may mean doing things that the audience does not want you to do. But it might be something that appeals to other people. Like the whole Firefly Funhouse thing, like the whole, cinematic matches. That stuff doesn't attach itself to certain people. But there are other people who do like it. And we have to look at that, what's the good for the greatest number, Then you also have your extra agendas like, creativity, wanting to push boundaries and different things like that. And it's all very interesting. But you do have to take what is constructive criticism or what could be constructive criticism and taking it to the next level and taking it to, what other values do we have in this situation? And sometimes, you have other values, you have other things that people don't know about, or you just want to move forward. Like there are a lot of people who, I'll just say this. I saw some people, one podcaster in particular says WWE needs to stop bringing in people like Bill Goldberg, because they have to move forward. You have to kill the past or let the past die and move forward. It took them forever to get there. I was so bored. I just went to the comment section and saw that people summarized it for me. So thank you. But there are a piece of me that agrees with that. But then I say, Bill Goldberg wrestles twice a year. That means who is on TV all the other times of the year? The same people that you complain about every week. So it's like you complain about Drew McIntyre and you complain about Keith Lee and you complain about this person and this person sucks and that person, Roman sucks, Seth Rollins sucks. And those are the people that you watch 52 weeks a year. You say that they suck. You hate them. They're not stars. Yada, yada, yada. And then they bring in Goldberg and you say, well, they hold it on to Goldberg. It's like 2 matches a year. I don't think that's holding on. It's like if they're trying to force the guy to work every Monday or something, I would see how you may have a point. But, of course, these people also had a very different view of Sting. When Sting showed up to AEW, they need to let the past die, even though there's far more people on the AEW roster that's over the age of 50 than it is on the WWE roster. Not supposed to mention that. Sting, Jericho, Daniels, Dustin, I think Dr. Luther is over 50. There's a bunch of people in AEW over the age of 50. There's not many at all in WWE. Other than Goldberg is the only one that's active that's over the age of 50. Now, the Undertaker is officially retired. And Undertaker, when he was active, was not that active. He probably had 2 or 3 matches a year. So you have to, put these things, again, perspective, put these things into context. I agree that sometimes you do have to let the past go. But you're talking about a business that had Terry Funk at 50 still wrestling. And this was in the Attitude Era. That people were putting world titles on Terry Funk when he was 50. ECW did that. That, he was people who were still pushing Ric Flair at 50. People who were still using Dusty when Dusty was above 50 and out of shape. This is the wrestling business, man. It just is how it is. I'm not going to begrudge. I don't really begrudge AEW for bringing in Sting. I don't care. I don't begrudge WWE for bringing in Goldberg. It's a way to bridge the older audience with the newer audience, because some people want you to do the greatest hits, and you can't always do the greatest hits. You have to also do the new stuff. But sometimes the greatest hits will be the lead in to you doing new stuff. Sure, bring in Bill Goldberg, have him lose to Roman Reigns in 4 minutes. But guess what? You got 3 other hours of new guys on the roster before people can get to Roman Reigns and Bill Goldberg's 4 minute match. So that makes sense to me that you have all this time to promote all these other guys. You know, your Big E's and your Seth Rollins, your Rey Mysterios, your Randy Ortons, your Fiends, all these times. You have all this time to promote all these people because there is a certain section of the audience that wants to see Bill Goldberg and only see Bill Goldberg, that they will sit and watch 3 hours of The Fiend or Roman and Randy Orton, people that they probably never paid attention to because they don't watch Raw every week. Okay, you have the opportunity to connect with different people. AEW is smart. They know this. They promote Sting, and then they put Sting in their ring with Darby Allin. Why do you think that they would do something like that? Because they're saying, oh, if we can use Sting to get people to watch, to bring it to bring more viewers in that maybe will attach themselves to Cody or Darby Allin, then we don't need Sting as much in the future. Common sense, basic marketing. But you don't see a lot of this type of analysis from wrestling journalists and wrestling podcasters. They just snap and lose their minds every time somebody mentions Goldberg or Brock Lesnar or something like that. It's really low IQ stuff, and I'm legit about that. Like, I don't like calling out names, but I will start doing it if I have to. Especially if it's especially egregious. I think that it will be necessary. John Alba, who was on Twitter, said something that was absolutely ridiculous the other day about CM Punk. You know, if AEW brings in CM Punk, they will be able to beat Raw and overall viewers. I'm like, please stop it. Okay, it's ludicrous. So to get back to this interview, I did forget for a minute what I was doing. So David Meltzer also said that WWE is different from other sports because in other sports, it's always about the team. Like, you promote the team. And that in wrestling is really one of the first things where you promote the athlete, the individual star. I would disagree with this because boxing is one of them. UFC doesn't really do a lot of individual, they do it occasionally. Like, they did it with Ronda Rousey. They do it a little bit with Conor McGregor. But a lot of their top guys in UFC are toxic, like John Jones, like constantly going to jail and stuff like that. So they try to promote the brand. And that's the reason why you would promote the brand over the individual performer. Because if the individual performer says something or does something or decides to leave, then it completely damages the brand. Like when The Rock jumped up and went to Hollywood, or when Stone Cold Steve Austin couldn't wrestle anymore because he had a bad neck, or Hulk Hogan called somebody a nigger or something like that, and it completely ruins his brand. It makes sense to promote the brand and not the individual performer, because the individual performer can make mistakes, and of course it will ruin the brand. So, but WWE is a star-driven promotion, and it always will be. They may temper that by saying, okay, we're going to put you here and, not put you up in this spot because we don't want to give this person too much ability to damage the brand by leaving or getting sick or having a bad attitude or whatever. And you will completely screw yourself. Vince McMahon was able to put all the other smaller promotions out of business because they put so much emphasis on one particular performer. Like Mid-South, how much, they put infamous emphasis on the Junkyard Dog. How they just had a rotating thing of heels for the Junkyard Dog to beat. He was seen as being the most invincible badass guy in the world. Vince paid him some money, took the Junkyard Dog out of Mid-South. They couldn't replace him. Bill Watts tried. He brought in Butch Reed and a bunch of other black dudes. They just had him try to redo the Junkyard Dog. It didn't work. And, that kind of stuff happens. It wasn't really the same in the AWA. Hogan was, a top guy, yeah. And probably the top draw, but he wasn't, a Bockwinkel or anything like that, So it's a completely, but that's, one of the things that you try to prevent. Because WCW often did that too, when you kind of, you shovel some money around and you snatch Roddy Piper or Randy Savage or whoever from WWE, and now they just have no stars. They have to rebuild stars. So there is a reason why you would have a brand-driven idea versus a star-driven idea. Stars can be lured away. Hollywood, other promotions, they can offer money, stuff like that. This is what, people claim this has killed the indies. Because Vince McMahon comes along, pokes out Adam Cole or Tommaso Ciampa or Johnny Gargano or whatever, and then the indies have no draws. It's like, okay, well, yeah, and that might be a bit of a point, but it should save you some money, and you have the opportunity to build new stars, which of course WWE had to do as well. When Brock Lesnar, they built him up as a star, and he jumped ship and he left because he didn't like travel, so he left. And Bill Goldberg, they gave him they didn't give him a huge push, but they gave Goldberg a different decent push, and then Bill Goldberg didn't like what was going on, and he left. So there is a reason to do star-driven versus brand-driven. But David Meltzer basically says that WWE kind of initiated the whole concept of star-driven performance. And I disagree with this. Again, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, you can Hank Aaron, you can, Babe Ruth. You can say that these names and people know who you're talking about. But he is correct that in sort of the modern world, with the exception of maybe LeBron James and some other major, massive players like Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant underwent a rape case, which, if he hadn't been on the team with, a bunch of other guys, may have sunk the Los Angeles Lakers. But, they tried to promote the team over the individual player because the individual player might not be big of a star or something like that. So David Meltzer asks about that. How do you push the individual star? What's the individual star? And Stephanie says that, that wrestling is, all about the star power. It's all about the attraction. And that, when it comes to building stars and making new stars, that they have to have their own individual personas and their own individual voices. That there has to be, they had to be able to connect on a personal level. That, the audience wants to be able to connect on a personal level. That, the audience can't connect with a brand, but they can connect with the person. And they want to know about the individual star, pets, different lifestyle things. And they enjoy that stuff. It makes the person more relatable. And I was like, that's true. It is true. Now, one of the smart mark things is that, okay, well, WWE thinks that it's important that people have individual personas, but they script promos. They think that it's important for guys to have this relationship with the audience, but they also ban Twitch and Cameo and all that sort of stuff. Now, it's interesting that, this came out around the same time as this interview, that Lana was talking about, the third party platform and stuff like that. And she says basically that, there are people within WWE who does not know how important this stuff is. That, that the opportunities that Twitch and Cameo and things like that make possible. That, that there are people who don't really understand it. That, and that makes sense to me because, of course, it's run by an 80-year-old man. So, of course, he doesn't understand the importance of Twitch. Now, there is also, like I continue to say, the competition aspect, because when I started seeing people, like one of the things that popped up again around the same time, hell, maybe even the same day, is that there were opening virtual meet and greets. And there were people in the comment section saying, I don't want to pay that. I don't want to pay $200 to talk to Bayley. And then there were other people willing to pay $200 to talk to Bayley. So it's like, well, you have that. Who's your audience? The guy who's not going to pay money to talk to Bayley, or the guy who is going to pay money to talk to Bayley? Who is your audience? It was the same thing with when the whole Bullet Club thing came out, and all these different websites. Impact was basically saying, "Oh, hurry up and buy Hard to Kill right now. Buy it right now. It's not happening until 30 days from now, but buy it right now." And then people would go and do it. They would say, "Okay, well, I'm going to go and boom right now. Pay my whatever, $20 or whatever right now, because I want to watch the 6-man tag main event." That's a good way of getting in. That's your target audience, is the people who see that we're trying to connect immediately with what you're trying to do. They want to give you money. Not, I want to give you criticisms. I want to tweet mean shit at you. I'm willing to give you money, but this is what you have to do for me, or this is what I think is worth it. That's what your audience is. So I do believe that Lana had a good point, that she's, in the process of, trying to educate them about, partnerships and different things like that. and how to expand and promote the individual performer in the social media space because there are so many opportunities there. Of course, WWE wants to just be like, okay, we don't have any partnerships with these organizations, even though they kind of do now with Twitch. And I still some people are not on Twitch, and other people are. Some people are on Cameo, other people aren't. But WWE does have relationships with TikTok and Twitch and and all these different things. So, but that's a good point. That was a good point. About how do you relate in a situation where things are going to be scripted and relate in a thing. But I think also that you can, when it comes to the individual performers, you could talk about that just like you could follow some actor on Twitter, it doesn't influence their on-screen personality, on-screen story. So that whole thing about it being scripted, you can take that out because it doesn't matter. They're just playing a role on TV. I know it sucks for some wrestling fans to hear that, but that's just kind of how it is, and it's always been that way. So you take that, you could take that part out, but engaging on third-party platforms like Twitch, that is an important thing, and it does bring people into the wrestler's world. But then you also have, again, the same situation that I just talked about. When you let a wrestler, when you bring people into the world of the wrestler, and they're talking to these people as equals, and they're just chatting with them, the wrestler is bound to say something that the people don't like. Like when you have these wrestlers, give you two, Low Key and Flip Gordon, and all these guys who are anti-mask, or they don't want to take the vaccine or something like that. That can detrimentally affect where they work. Okay, because they've let people in, and then they've said things that turn people off, and now people are like, I don't want to watch. I'm not watching anything that got this guy on it because he said something on Twitter I don't like. Jackson Riker taken off TV for 6 months because he supported Trump. So when you say, well, we want to be able to relate, that means you just want to, you want to follow people that you agree with, and you want to be able to discard people that you disagree with. We want Matt Riddle taken off TV, not because he's bad at what he does, but because, well, he might have done something that we can't prove that he did, and we just don't like his attitude on Twitter. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense, man. So it's a double-edged sword, and navigating that double-edged sword is very, very difficult, because if you try to quote unquote listen to the audience, what audience are you listening to? That's the first problem. Second problem is you're going to let people in by opening up the third-party platforms and all this different stuff. If that's going to be the case, then you open the door for different people to be put in situations that they can't control, people to say weird things to them, be able to follow them, find out where they lived. There's people who are not even WWE wrestlers that get stuff sent to their house, like Deonna Purrazzo. Like, people have been sending things to her house. Somebody sent some stuff to Billy Gunn's house. It's like, that's what happens when you try to relate. People will find out where you live. They will find out where you stay. They get that parasocial relationship with you where they feel like you're best friends. You get that weirdo that followed Sonya Deville on Twitter and found out where she lived. That's what happens when you let people get too close, when you try to relate too much. So you have Paige just had a similar situation where some dude showed up at her house. So you have to temper that. You got to find out what's the sweet spot when it comes to that sort of thing. So the interview closed with Stephanie being asked about the pressures of working with her family, and she talked about she works for her dad, she works with her husband. So there's a lot of family pressures, but she gave she'll talk about the different challenges and different things like that came with that. So she says that when you're dealing with family and business, sometimes you could be taken for granted, and sometimes people may take advantage of the familial relationship, so they may not put forth the same effort that they normally would. And it almost sounded like she was talking about from personal experience, but she talked about how the good things are that you share emotions, that you share goals, and that the shared goal can overcome other things. But then she gave one really good anecdote about Vince McMahon, and she says that working for Vince, when she came to work for Vince, that he told her straight up Not only to treat you that much different from anyone else, but it's just business. You cannot take it personally. And she says that it's very difficult for her to deal with because that is her dad. And she does take his criticisms and things like that personal. And she says that, he occasionally hurts her feelings. And she talked about Paul Heyman, who we know that, from story, that Stephanie McMahon is not the biggest fan of Paul Heyman. And she talked about how Paul Heyman walked up to her while she was distraught one time and said that, that this was a really good thing that Vince McMahon hurt her feelings and that she, got into this tiff with him. And she says that, why is this a good thing? And Paul says, if you can go toe to toe with Vince McMahon and stand up for what you believe in, everyone else is essentially a piece of cake. And she says that Paul was right, that, working for her dad and dealing with this whole, with, his personality and being able to take these barbs that, that kind of get thrown at her, and still be able to show up and do and earn his respect, that she really isn't intimidated by anyone else. That, it made her sort of fearless because, and Paul Heyman was basically talking about this being part of her training, that, this is part of your training, is that you have to take the worst that people can give and not take it personally and then push through. And I thought that was very important because, we see all the time how Vince McMahon is, how he's very hard on people. And that's what I love about those documentaries, that sometimes you get to see what he's excited about. You also get to see the sort of things that he's kind of like, no, don't like that. That's why I love that he, gave Kevin Owens a kick in the ass that time when he told him he didn't like that WrestleMania match. I love that because not that the match was bad. It's just that he's telling somebody has to tell you the truth in order to make you better. And sometimes you have this change in the wrestling business where everybody is friends. Even the promoters are friends with the talent. So nobody ever improves. Nobody ever gets real criticism. It's like just as brutal as some people are with Vince, about your product sucks. Raw gets low time ratings, lowest ratings of all time. Your product sucks. And then he is that brutal on the wrestlers because they want to improve. He wants to improve. He wants to do different things. This show didn't work. We got another week to try it. He didn't fire Kevin Owens for having a bad match or a match that he didn't like. He basically told him, your performance was shit. This is what you can do to fix it. This is how you change that. This is what we can do. Send people to get extra training. You yell at them like a coach would yell at them. And some people just don't know how to handle that. They're used to showing up. The promoter is a mark. They give them money. They go out, do whatever they want. They come back. They don't see the guy again for 3 months. It's a completely different situation than, you see Vince McMahon every single week. You perform in front of him live every single week. And guess what? Anybody who is in the live event business will do the similar things. If you're going to work with, with a theater troupe and you're not being told that your performance is trash, then how do you know that you're going to get any better? You just say, well, we're not going to give you the job. We're going to give the job to this person. It's like, well, why? How can I make my performance better? And this is where the criticism comes in. And some people say, well, you shouldn't yell at people. You can't yell at people. It's like, so what? Get over it. We're talking about guys here. And especially guys who've some of these guys, spent time in locker rooms. They're used to coaches yelling at them. It snaps something in their mind. It's a urgency. Get it together. Not a sit down, hold this guy's hand. Here, let's talk about why you feel the need to be a very bad promo. Why do you feel like it's necessary for you to be so very bad at promos? It's like, no, we paid you X amount of dollars while you was in the performance center to cut promos and you still suck. Go sit down. Like a coach, it's not a coach's job to make you feel good about throwing an interception or fumbling the football or an unnecessary foul or doing stupid things on the court or on the field that you should not have done. That's not a coach's job. A coach's job is to fucking ream you for making mistakes and costing the team money, helping the team lose. Constructive criticism, but criticism nonetheless. And I'm glad that, she also gets that, because everybody should get it. Everybody should get, be told that they can do better. I've been told, how I can make my channel better. And I implemented some of those ideas. One of them was, musical intros. So I just created 100,000 fucking entrances, and I just pick one and post it, and it seems to have gotten, positive reaction. People actually like the idea of, musical intros. I'm like, okay, cool. Musical intros, musical outros. Okay. What can I do next? You know, within reason, of course. I'm not going to put my whole face on the fucking internet. That's not about to happen. But, this was an interesting, illuminating, interview. It was 30 minutes. It was 17 minutes, but I was able to get almost 40 minutes of information out of it. And I really enjoyed it. Normally I wouldn't even watch these sort of business things, but I saw the internet posting weird quotes out of context. I'm like, okay, what's going on? But obviously it's clickbait, because the wrestling media works on clickbait. That's what they do. And sometimes they just make shit up whole cloth. Other times they will post things out of context. But whatever. Thank you guys for listening. Support alternative wrestling media. Sometimes you guys have to be able to get different opinions, different analysis. And because these people have so much influence, like I talked about earlier, man, it's an uphill battle. And I never promote my old Twitter account, but I do have a Twitter account. It's MongoSlade8, the number 8, on Twitter. And follow me there if you guys care to. I'm sometimes talking about politics. Sometimes I'm talking about wrestling. I don't always tweet wrestling live, because I try to save some stuff for these videos. But you can follow me there. You can also send me money via Cash App, which would be in the comment section. You can also just subscribe, like these videos, make sure you get notifications. And I appreciate everybody who engages with every video. Thank you guys so much. I try to respond to everybody, or at least hit a like if I seen what you said. And feel free to also send me suggestions for videos or different topics that I can talk about. I love different when people, because I don't pay attention to everything. And plus I'm blocked from a lot of wrestling websites because I chew out like the editor-in-chief. I get blocked from the website. I almost got blocked from John Alba for his ridiculous CM Punk thing. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. And I'll talk to you guys later.